What's up, friends? Welcome into another episode of Tables, Tailgates, and Top Loaders. So happy to have you all aboard for this episode. I'm your host, as always, TB. Thank you all so very much for stopping in and checking out the 3Ts. I hope you all are staying warm out there wherever you are in the world, in the country, what have you. But we have so much to get to, so much to talk about. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in. Hobby enthusiasts, card collectors, you are on the clock. It's been a minute since I've started out with you guys, but I feel like it's time. So how are we feeling? I need to be honest with you folks. It's been a tough go lately in the industry. I don't know if you all follow some of the stories surrounding the hobby, but there's been a lot of crap, a lot of negative stories, a lot of negative things circling around the hobby. And I felt like it was time to talk about some of them today because I think some of these stories are important, and I think it also will show you where my mindset is right now with this thing, with this hobby, with one of the 3Ts. And if I'm being completely honest, I have thought numerous times about actually making some changes to this podcast. And what I'm talking about, I've been thinking about changing from the 3Ts to the 2Ts. and I'll tell you why. If you go all the way back to the beginning of this journey, all the way back to what I was trying to accomplish from the very beginning, I was talking about why I love these three hobbies and how they have become a part or have been a part of my life. And I'm finding it harder and harder to stay positive about sports cards, about card collecting, because of all the negativity, because of where the industry is heading, because of some of the changes I've seen in the last 2 years, last 3 years. And some of this stuff I've talked about before. You know, I complain about skyrocketing box prices. I have complained about the inability to get product. I've talked about, the EQL system and all this stuff. Some of this stuff I've talked about before, but it all seems to have gotten completely out of hand. And as a consumer, as someone who comes on here and tries to stay positive and tries to talk about the fun, because that's the most important factor, the fun factor of this thing, and, sticking with something I love, it's been mad frustrating. And some of these same issues have kind of reared their ugly head within the last few weeks. And we're going to dive into some of that stuff. So let's start with this PSA news. Now, PSA, for those who don't know, PSA is now the industry standard when it comes to grading your sports cards, when it comes to grading your cards of any kind. And what do I mean by grading? So grading, basically what that means is you have cards that you like, that you want to protect. And what you do is you send them off to a company, and we're going to talk specifically about a few of them today, but you send them off to a company. The company then has people that they've hired. They review your card pretty much under a microscope. They have certain things that they look for when it comes to the quality of your card, and they then put a grade on your card, and they create a label. They encase the card in a solid plastic structure, essentially, that protects the card and keeps it safe, and it locks in this grade of the card at that point in time. And what you're hoping to do is get a perfect score. So most of the time it's out of a 10, and then it kind of they break down this score depending on the quality of your card, and that score also usually is associated with what they think the card is worth. Now, when they log this card into a system of some sort, they keep a database of how many cards have been submitted of the same card, right? So I don't know, whatever you want, 1952 Mickey Mantle, X number of cards of this have been submitted. A certain percentage are a 10 and a 9, and you just work your way down the list, right? So you should be able to, once you submit a card and it's graded and it's kind of logged, you should be able to then see where your card ranks amongst all the other submissions of that similar card and how many other cards of that are there that have the same grade. So anyway, PSA, they're like the top of the mountain when it comes to card submissions and getting your cards graded. They're like the pinnacle, right? So earlier this week, they announced that they were coming out with another price increase to submit your cards and get these cards graded. In addition, they have extended the wait time. So how long it's actually going to take for you to get your card back from them. So you pay an increased price, and they are now telling you not only has the price gone up, but now it's going to take us longer to process this and to get you your card back. So you pay more to wait longer, essentially, is what the issue is becoming. Well, here's the problem. How many people out there, how many people listening have ever played the game Monopoly? And well, what's the point of the game? The point of the game is to buy out, trade for, somehow acquire all the properties around the game board, or get as many of these properties as you can, because then what do? You eliminate the other players in the game, because essentially when the players land on your property, the more you have, the more money you get. And your goal is to bankrupt the other players. And you do so by collecting as many of the properties on the game board as you can. So it makes it harder and harder for your opponents to find safe spaces. So every time they roll the dice, every time they take a turn, they're essentially paying you money. And this is kind of what PSA has done, or has attempted to do, over the last few years. Now, it started out with rival grading company SGC. In February of 2024, it was announced, PSA, they bought out their rival. And when I say rival, I mean, this is another company that was in the grading card space. That was SGC. We all have our preferences when it comes to things. Like, we all have a specific way that we like to do things. So if, like, you have a car mechanic that you take your car to, you gain a trust, you gain a certain way that you like things done, whether it's a restaurant or whatever product or whatever service you're paying for. Look, we all have things that we get used to, we get comfortable with, and then we go with them. Well, as far as when it comes to how we submit and grade cards, for me, SGC was at the top. I love the way SGC slabs look. And when I say slab, a slab is simply the way the encasement looks. So your card is now encased in this permanent plastic sleeve. And I just love the way historically SGC has done it. They have this simple black and white tuxedo look to the label that they attach or affix to the top of the encasement. I think it looks sharp. I think it looks professional. And when it comes to just displaying your cards, what doesn't match with black or white? So a lot of people will submit cards because they want to protect them and they want to display them, and they put them in their room or their office or their man cave or whatever the hell you want to talk about. But they like to display their cards. If they're not going to sell them for monetary, if they're not in the flipping industry, people have their cards graded because they want to look at them. And a lot of times a black and white tuxedo look, it really matches anything that you're displaying it with. So anyway, it doesn't matter. So PSA bought out SGC. Now you could still submit your cards to SGC, but it now falls under the PSA umbrella. So what they're doing now, PSA, once they took over SGC in February of 2024, they have essentially said, well, now SGC still exists, but now they're trying to tweak it. They're now branding it as this like special boutique experience. And they're claiming that the focus of SGC is to focus on the vintage cards. So like older stuff, real older stuff. So what's the result of this? What have we seen as a result of this? Well, SGC slabs, people who have graded with SGC in the past, they have seen a significant drop in the value of these cards. How do I know this? Because this is what I'm looking for when I go on eBay, when I go on some of these sites, when I'm looking for cards that I want to buy. I love the look of SGC. I'm not in the flipping game. I'm not in the business of making money. I just want cards that I want for my personal collection. So when I'm searching, I'm looking for graded cards. I love the tuxedo look, as I've said. And I've seen cards that I've been eyeing up. I've seen SGC cards, the slabs, take a significant hit. So the value of these slabs is definitely going down over the last 2 years. They just don't stand up in value in comparison to a PSA slab. So if you have an SGC card that's been graded a 10 and you have a PSA card that's been graded a 10, you put those exact same two cards together next to each other, the PSA card is going to carry more value. Why? Because they're the industry leader. They're the industry standard, and they've essentially bought out SGC. So PSA is like the top of the mountain, goes back to the Monopoly thing. And this is kind of a shame, right? Again, this is my personal opinion. I think the PSA slabs are okay, but in no way are they my favorite. Like, I just don't like the way they look. It's a red label. They have a red label, and it looks like it came out of a typewriter. And I think the label looks cheap. You put it side by side with a SGC slab, I don't think there's any comparison, in my opinion. I would go with SGC all day. I think it's clean. Like I said, I think it looks professional. It looks sharp. But in the industry, we're talking about money talks. But it doesn't stop there. So just a few months ago, in December of 2025, PSA, they did the exact same thing. They bought out another rival grading company. This time it was Beckett. Now, Beckett has been in the space, in the industry, a long, long time. right? They came to prominence in the 80s and the 90s. They kind of set a standard within the hobby. They're huge when it came to like magazines. You used to order Beckett grading magazine or pricing magazines, and you could look up the value of your card. So I remember doing this when I was a kid. Oftentimes you would go to a mall. Malls were always the spot to have card shows. And you go to a mall and certain tables would be set up and they would have Beckett magazines sitting there, and you could literally look up any card you wanted and it would tell you the value of the card, right? Because we didn't have eBay. We didn't have like these databases that you could simply type in the card and then you could see all the sales. You would have to rely on these Beckett magazines to tell you what the price of the cards were back then. So in the 80s and 90s, Beckett really became a standard within the hobby, within the trading card industry. Well, they got into the grading portion of the hobby as well. And along the way, bad decisions were made. They started to kind of slip a little bit. They were at the top, but they were still doing business and they were kind of falling back a little bit. And people still continued to submit with them, but it got lower and lower and lower. So as we get closer to this buyout that happened a few months ago, Beckett was operating right around a 3 to 5% of the market share. And when I say market share, I mean of the slab, the grading industry. So you have PSA, who right now is operating probably around 75 to 80% of the market share. And you have a second company, CGC, who we're not really going to talk about today, but CGC is probably the company who grades non-sports cards. So like your Pokemon stuff and all that stuff in that realm, people mostly have their stuff graded with CGC. And then the lower percentage companies, this is where you'll see Beckett. So Beckett was operating right around 3 to 5% of the market share. Well, here comes PSA. They snatch up Beckett too. And it's the same story after this acquisition. They claim Beckett is still going to continue to operate in the same space. They will continue to provide the same services, blah, blah, blah. It's the same story, just like they told with SGC. And you know how the results are going to go. People still own Beckett slabs, but they're not going to be worth as much. So this is going to continue to drive even more and more submissions to who? PSA, which is the intention in the first place. So they bought out SGC, they bought out Beckett. They're claiming that these companies are still going to exist under the umbrella of PSA, right? But their value is essentially plummeted. So why would you submit the cards unless simply, going back to what I was telling you, you just like the way they look? And if you're not in the flipping game, and that's just the slab you like, whether it's SGC or Beckett, yeah, you'll still continue to submit to them. But as far as the flipping game, which is ballooned and taken over, right? People are not going to submit their cards to those companies because the value just isn't there anymore. So now it's back to the story of this week, another price increase that's come out from the PSA camp. What PSA expects you to forget is that they've already done this 2 other times in the last 12 months. So PSA is now on their third price increase and their third turnaround time increase in the last 12 months. Are you serious? And the argument I hear everywhere is that this is to try to decrease the amount of total submissions because they claim that they can't keep up with the demand for card submissions. They're saying that by increasing the prices, they expect the submissions to go down. Nope, I'm sorry, I don't buy that for a second. And this is clearly what you do when you have created a monopoly. Going back to the game, you can essentially charge whatever the hell you want because you are practically the only game left in town. You have bought out your competition and now you are calling all the shots. Just because SGC and Beckett still exist doesn't mean that they have any relevancy anymore. And this is what I was talking about. The value of their product has gone way down. And now you are forcing those who are in the space of trying to make money to use the only service that is left, which is now PSA. Look, the writing is on the wall, folks. If you don't believe it, I don't know what to tell you, but it's right in front of our faces. And so, in my opinion, this idea that they are doing this to decrease business is just ridiculous. Why would you ever want to decrease your business? I don't think it's to decrease the business. I think that they're pushing this stuff, this narrative that the demand is too high. Why? It's to try to lower the consumer's expectations. Why? Why would they want to lower the consumer's expectations? Well, the only thing we have left to do, we have 2 things left to do: stop buying the product, or complain. Hey, we're in 2026. The thing we love to do the most is complain. I mean, I come on this podcast every week and I usually complain about something. But that's all we have left to do is complain, because turnaround times were already insane for a value submission. Oh, and I didn't even talk about like what the prices are up to. If you go to the PSA website, they show you the price updates for new submissions. And frankly, it's insane. Most people operate in this value category. Well, what has the value category gone from? If you submit a card who has a value of less than $500, which is, I think, is where most of us operate, it used to cost you, and this was a week ago, it used to cost you $27.99 to submit a card, one card to get graded. Now that cost has gone up $5 per card. And now the value category is $32.99, $33 to get one card graded. Are you kidding me? $33. And what's the turnaround time? Well, they're telling you the turnaround time for a value card that now costs you $33. If you go, this is directly from their website, $32.99 per card. Estimated turnaround time, 75 business days. 75 business days. Are you kidding me? Are you insane? And so people were already saying that the turnaround times were out of control. So this idea that they're coming out saying, oh, we had to increase our prices because too many people are submitting cards and blah, 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 blah. No. They're doing this to try to lower your expectations because there's no chance in hell that you're ever going to get your card back in 75 days. That's 3 months, by the way. 3 months. 75 business days is 3 months. And if you think you're actually getting your cards back in 75 days, you're nuts. You better block out 5 to 6 months of not having your stuff. If you're an average Joe like me who just wants to get a few cards graded, slabbed, put around your personal collection, hang them on your wall, put them on your desk, whatever. But you know they got you no matter what. So this statement that they're trying their best, that the demand is too high and they just can't keep up. Well, look, they're trying to tell you that the price increases are a result of too many submissions. Okay, PSA. I hear what you're saying, but I think you're full of crap. And you know that this company is in the position where they can increase prices to literally whatever they want because they own almost the entire market. And the only thing people have left to do is complain. They will complain, they will submit, and they will now sit there and wait. Complain, submit, and wait. Another cycle. You know how I love my cycles. And here we are again. Complain, submit, and wait. I don't know, but this is a real problem and there's no end in sight. There's no end. And keep track of it because it wouldn't shock me to see this trend continue and prices most likely will probably go up again in 2026. I mean, we're only in February. Why will prices continue to go up? Because it helps the bottom line of PSA. And that's the only thing they care about. Instead of increasing their infrastructure, instead of, actually addressing the problem and maybe having another headquarters or adding another facility and doubling your staff. I mean, you're the only game in town. You can't hire another 100, 200, 300 people, whatever it takes to deal with the influx of product. Instead, they're just going to keep increasing prices and making more and more money. And this doesn't stop unless people stop submitting their cards. And unfortunately, the hobby has become such a business now that I don't see that happening anytime soon. So it's so frustrating. And that's just the grading space. But if you don't like that story, I got another one for you. Maybe you've seen this, maybe not. But this has drawn even more negative attention to the breaking community. Now, if you don't know what breaking is essentially, we talk about buying product, like a new product comes out. So for example, what just hit? Topps 2026 Baseball Series 1 just hit. Now, it doesn't matter, but just follow me. So somebody called a breaker gets a lot of this product, whatever you want to say, 2026 Topps Baseball. They get a lot of product. And then they host a break on some sort of platform. So whether it's Whatnot, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Fanatics, it doesn't matter. They host a break. And what they want the consumer to do is come into this room, come into this channel, and buy a spot in their break from the product that they have. So let's say it's 2026 Topps Baseball. They want you to come in and they will divide up that product into certain categories. Most of the time, it revolves around a certain team. So let's say you're a Baltimore Orioles fan. You come in, they have the product listed. They have all the teams listed that are going to be in that product. So every team in Major League Baseball. And then each team is assigned a numeric value, a monetary value. So you want the Orioles? Well, depending on the players who are in that product, they raise or lower the prices accordingly, is what they're supposed to do. Oh, this team is in high demand. This team has a lot of good players, maybe a lot of hot young rookies that are supposed to be really good. So the price maybe will go up or down to reflect that accordingly. So you want to buy the Orioles out of Topps Series 1, and maybe they're opening a single jumbo hobby box. A single jumbo hobby box historically runs, or at least for this release, it was $200. Well, instead of $200, they're gonna charge I don't know. They're gonna raise the price, and it's gonna be $300, and they're gonna divide it evenly over the teams, and blah blah blah. Anyway, they use this calculation, and then they drive up and create these margins, and you pay, let's say, $35 to buy the Baltimore Orioles. Then the breaker opens the product on camera, and whatever players come out that are linked to the team you bought, you essentially will own those cards. Right? So that's essentially what breaking is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be by team. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes you go into a room and you can randomly buy a spot. And so if it's baseball, you might end up with the Miami Marlins, and you're like, oh, what the hell did I just pay $50 for the Marlins? Who gives a crap, right? And somebody will be lucky and they'll get the Dodgers or the Yankees, and everyone's happy. But you get these other scrubs who get the Marlins, and you're like, oh, that was a freaking waste of money. But anyway, back to the story. In the breaking community, there's a YouTuber and there's a breaker named Pac-Man Breaks, and he's running breaks on the Whatnot app, which is a breaking platform, a breaking service. People go to the Whatnot app and they sell a lot of stuff. Well, he has a breaking channel on the Whatnot app. Now, he's selling a product called Midnight Basketball, Topps Midnight Basketball. Now, truth be told, I have gone to his YouTube channel prior to this whole fiasco coming out. I've seen some of his videos. He usually opens the products. He usually talks about them. Sometimes I think his opinion is okay. Like sometimes I like to check out what other people are thinking of certain products. He does a lot of basketball. He does a lot of football. And so I like to see what people think of the product ahead of time. So he gives his opinion on them. Okay, fine. So far, so good. This is what a lot of people do. But he also does breaks on this Whatnot app. Well, here's the problem. He recently reviewed this Topps Midnight Basketball product, and basically what he said was, it's trash. And he talks about it on his YouTube channel, and then he goes and breaks the exact same product on Whatnot, and he hypes it up like it's amazing. And like he essentially insinuates during the breaks that you need to jump in because you're going to make a ton of money on this product that he just got done trashing over on his YouTube page. But it's worse than you think. It's worse than you think because, as I just explained, in most breaks, the product is divided into teams, right? And we just talked about this with the Baltimore Orioles example. In this break, he's not selling teams. He decided he's going to break the product down into individual players, which is way worse and way more ridiculous. And he's charging these ungodly amounts of money for a very specific individual player. And for this product, Topps Midnight Basketball, there are practically no cards in a box. So, for example, a hobby box, you buy one hobby box of Midnight Basketball, you know how many cards you get? 7. One hobby box has 7 cards in it. A whole case, if you want to buy a whole case, there's 8 boxes in a case. 8. So a whole case of cards is only going to have 56 cards in it. An entire case. And I think an individual hobby box was running some ridiculous amount, like $500-$600 for 7 cards. And so this guy has a 10-case break that he is selling. 10 cases. So a grand total, over 10 cases of product, there are only 560 cards. And instead of dividing it up into teams, this guy has divided it up into individual players. So you want to talk about lowering your odds to an insane degree. Not only are you not getting a team, but now you're hoping and praying that your ridiculous amount of money is going to land you a single individual player. And the player in this case that he goes off on is Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper is a rookie for the San Antonio Spurs. Nice player. But in this video and this Whatnot break this video that has kind of caught fire, he's charging $5,000 for a single spot to grab rookie Dylan Harper of the San Antonio Spurs. $5,000. And if you watch this video, guess what? No one is falling for this. No one. No one is buying it. And if you've ever been in one of these break rooms, the great thing about it is there's a chat. There's a live chat that scrolls as this live video is happening. It's no different than YouTube and all this other stuff, except the chat is live. So time is ticking by. Minutes are turning into hours. These open spots are literally sitting there. And this guy, Pac-Man, he's getting more and more aggravated, and he's getting bent, and he's taking it out on the customers, the people who are actually in the room watching this, because they're refusing to pay these ridiculous prices for players who just aren't worth anything near the crazy prices he's trying to charge. and he's becoming aggressive. He's talking down to people. He's basically looking like a total freaking clown. He becomes this arrogant, entitled. I mean, he already was arrogant. He was already kind of like this entitled kind of child, if I'm being completely honest. But he's acting like this arrogant, entitled a-hole who isn't getting his way. It's like a petulant child in this room. And this was a perfect example of people finally waking up to what has been happening on the breaking side of this hobby. And he's getting blasted for this video, and rightly so. But the problem is that this is not solely this one video. This is happening everywhere. This is happening on platforms all across the breaking community. And this is how it goes. Like, rooms sit open, breaks go unfilled. You go into a room. I've done this. I've physically done this. I've done this many times because I want to see what is actually happening. I will go log into an app or one of these channels, one of these platforms, and you pick a specific room who's advertising products. You go into the room and you see what I've seen this guy or this girl or this breaker. They're sitting on their phone. They're playing on their computer. They're watching TV. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening for hours because they can't get people to buy into their breaks, or it takes forever to fill these breaks. And then they sit there in this empty room where nothing's happening, and they try to convince you that these products are so great and that every card you're going to hit is unbelievable, when in fact most of this stuff is complete and utter garbage. And it's like this time after time, room after room. Breaking has slowly taken over the industry, and it is becoming a problem. Full disclosure, I have participated in some of this stuff, and I've seen some really good breaks and I've seen some really bad breaks. When I was first kind of testing the waters and seeing what this was a few years ago. I can't even remember the product, but it was a baseball product. And I think I got in the room and I bought like the Minnesota Twins, because one of the players I try to PC is like Royce Lewis or something. And I wanted to try to jump in and see what this was all about. So I think one of the breakers had a coupon code or whatever the case may be. Anyway, I gave it a shot. I ended up getting like 2 cards. And now with the coupon code, thank God, it only cost me like $15. But I was like, it would have cost me like $40 to end up with 2 crappy low-end cards. And I'm like, well, that was disappointing. So then I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try this a couple more times. And then the WWE Chrome product came out, which I love, but you couldn't get it anywhere. So the only way you could get your hands on some of these cards is to enter into some of these breaks. So I went into this one breaker's room who usually breaks a lot of WWE products. Well, they were doing in this room randomly generated wrestlers. Right. So, and this can change depending on the room, but they have like a wheel, and then on the wheel, they put all the wrestlers' names, and they basically, the computer spins the wheel, and wherever it lands, you get the player's name. And there's all kinds of variations like this, right? They'll come up with all sort of things. So the computer will randomly generate 2 names, and you can pick which one of the 2 you want. And then the other one gets thrown back into the pile, and you just keep doing that until all the breaks are essentially bought, right? So I joined this random WWE break, and I end up getting assigned Bianca Belair. And I can't even remember what I paid for Bianca Belair. It was like $40. And I ended up with like 2 cards of Bianca Belair. And I'm like, oh, okay, now thank goodness one of them was numbered. But you think 2 numbered or 1 numbered and 1 regular Bianca Belair card is worth $40? Are you kidding me? Maybe $4. Did I have a good experience? I think I had a pretty good experience in the baseball room a few years back because it was entertaining. I felt like it was fun. I didn't feel pressured into doing anything. But as I'm doing the WWE break, the guy was just pushing and pushing and pushing. Oh, you got to get in on this. And it was just like trying to convince you that these ridiculous prices were perfect, and you're actually underpaying. You're actually getting a bargain. And this is exactly what this Pac-Man scenario is. He's trying to convince you that $5,000 for Dylan Harper is a steal, and that you're going to make well more than your investment. Out of 560 cards, how many times do you think you're going to hit a Dylan Harper? Maybe once or twice? Maybe? But the idea that 2 cards, you're going to get $5,000 worth out of 2 cards? There's no freaking chance. And so we've come to the point where some breaks can be okay, but you got to be careful. But it all comes down to straight up gambling. That's what we are doing, folks. That's what we are doing. This is no different than going to Las Vegas, no different than sitting at the blackjack table or the craps table. You are essentially gambling away your money. But the difference, in my opinion, is when you go to Vegas, no one ever tells you that you're going to win when you sit at the table. You sit down, you give them your money, and they say, "Good luck, shooter." And they kind of give you this look like, well, you're just pissing your money away because that's what you're doing. You're watching your money be pissed away. Now, sometimes you win, but most of the time, what's the Vegas rule? The house always wins. Well, here, the house, these breaking sites, they're trying to convince you that you're never going to lose. And it's just a bunch of garbage. They try to convince you that the crap you're pulling from these random packs is worth 10 times the amount that it actually is. It's bad. It is really, really bad. So yeah, breaking, I've talked about it before, but not as much in this detail, but it doesn't stop there, because this negativity train on this episode of the 3 Ts, we're going to keep rolling, because this is the grand finale. This is the grand finale for this segment. I got one more story for you, but I need to preface this story with the following. Quote, "This is unverified alleged information. I am not presenting this next segment as fact, nor am I asserting the accuracy of the information. I am merely commenting on what has been made public, and I am offering my humble opinion as TB, and which is most likely totally worthless." So there you go. Hopefully I will now not get sued after talking about this next story. But the next story involves this Fanatics leak that has happened, in which essentially this goes all the way back to the National, which is one of the main card shows. We've talked about the National before, but these documents were leaked, which reveal this confidential data that shows a breakdown of the hierarchy of distributors and breakers. And we just talked about the breaking industry, right? These documents came out and listed mega breakers, mega distributors of product, and who is getting what and who is spending what money. So you have certain high-end card distributors. You all know who I'm talking about. I've mentioned them numerous times before, right? So if you're not getting your product directly from Topps, it's going to only come from one of probably three places where you go and you buy your card supplies: Blowout Cards, DA Cards, and Steel City, right? But your main two, Blowout Cards and DA, Dave and Adams. But then it goes on and it lists all these other breakers who are spending and what they're spending to get product. And we are talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? So, okay, maybe you're just like, well, yeah, it makes sense. These companies are going to pay millions of dollars to get product. What's the problem? Okay, well, what the problem is it allegedly, let me make sure I'm saying allegedly, but it's basically saying that there's a connection between the breakers, how much they're paying, and what access they have to their own channels. Now, we have to kind of break this down, right? We have to kind of break this down, because we just talked about breaking platforms. Well, Fanatics has slowly worked their way to the forefront of the breaking platforms. They have created their own app, and they are now practically leading the charge when it comes to spaces in which people turn to for breaks. So we've already talked about this, but there are multiple platforms that exist in this breaking space. We've talked about YouTube. We've talked about Whatnot. eBay Live has just joined the space, but Fanatics has pushed, I'd say, all the way to the front. Is this a coincidence? Hell no, it's not a coincidence. Go back 4 years ago. What happened 4 years ago? This kind of changed the industry. It created a rumble throughout the whole industry. What does Fanatics go and do 4 years ago? They bought out Topps. The Topps industry. Fanatics bought Topps. What does Topps do? They make most of the trading cards in this space. Yes, Panini exists. Yes, Upper Deck exists and Leaf exists, but Topps is the industry standard, and they were bought out by Fanatics. And we've seen it recently. Topps and Fanatics are acquiring all these licenses to your major sporting teams, to your major sporting leagues. They just got football back. They just got wrestling. So Fanatics bought Topps, and now they're acquiring all the licenses. And now they've established their own breaking card platform. So breaking cards has become more and more popular. Fanatics creates their own breaking platform, and lo and behold, what are we seeing? The top breakers in the industry are leaving the other platforms. So they're leaving YouTube, they're leaving Whatnot, they're leaving eBay Live, and they're coming over to Fanatics. And they have now joined with the industry leader, Fanatics, to host their breaks. Is this a problem? Of course it is. Open your eyes, people. Fanatics now essentially owns everything. So what are we seeing with these leaks? We're seeing that Fanatics, who owns everything, is selling the product to the consumer, who we want to think is us, but we're not getting any of the product, which goes back to what happens on these release days. Nobody can get anything. And as we're seeing from these documents, allegedly, Fanatics is essentially funneling the product right back to the people who work for them and sell the product on their own app. We already kind of knew that this was happening, but now these alleged leaked documents are coming out. And it's proving what we already know. They are funneling the product directly to the most influential breakers who are now breaking on their own platform. Now, the Pac-Man thing, no, that didn't happen on Fanatics. It happened on Whatnot, but the point is the same. And Pac-Man isn't a top-tier breaker, but it's happening everywhere. That video is a microcosm of what is happening in break room after break room on every single breaking platform. The breakers are doing the same thing. They are talking down to their customer. They are hyping up the product. They are charging ridiculous amounts of money for a garbage team or a person or, random spot. The upcharges are happening everywhere, and now it's owned all by Fanatics. So they're funneling the product to the people that work for them, and they're jacking up the price to kick the profits back to those who produced it in the first place. And again, back to the game board. This is monopoly. Holy cow, people, this is a problem. This is a problem. You have to see what is going on here. You could say conspiracy theory all you want. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is happening. This is real. And again, this isn't going to be solved unless somebody else steps in and does something about it, which probably isn't going to happen. Look, I'm not trying to play Debbie Downer, but this stuff is real and it's happening all over the industry. And it takes me all the way back to the beginning of the podcast and how it's become awfully tough to come on here and talk positive about this hobby that I have loved for a long time when it's absolute crap. And as a podcaster, as someone who tries to look, and go back to episode 1, why I started this thing. Because I started it because I love these 3 things. I love these 3 hobbies: the Buffalo Bills, professional wrestling, card collecting. I love them. But it's very hard to focus on stories that are positive because there's not a lot out there. And if you dig deep, if you read between the lines and you actually see what is going on, it's really, really tough. So I say that all to say, I'm going to try to keep focus on stories I can tell, but those stories are becoming smaller and smaller. I'm going to try to focus on products that I can actually speak about, but right now it's very hard because it's extremely limited. And we talked about the stories of not being able to get product. And this is happening for collectors like me all over the market, all over the industry. Topps says the pre-sale goes up at 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. And then you can get online, and people are doing it, and nobody can buy any of this product. And allegedly, as we're seeing, they're funneling the product to their own employees. And the market share of the direct consumer approach is essentially gone. I heard one person argue that Fanatics doesn't want you and I to actually buy this product unless it's through a breaker. And at first I thought, well, that's crazy. But the more and more I dig into this, the more and more likely that that's actually going to be the only way we're going to be able to get our hands on this stuff. And that's scary. That's a scary thing to think about. And I hope that's not true. But yeah, you can go to Walmart and you can buy this retail stuff. But as we're seeing, nothing is in retail. It just goes back to why you're in the hobby. And this is what I kind of talk about. It's frustrating. But like I said, I'm going to try to talk about stories I can actually talk about and product I can actually buy. But right now it's very, very, very limited. I learned real quick that I couldn't keep up with the calendar. I couldn't keep up with the release calendar. I had started out, I talked about this a long time ago. I made a YouTube channel called Real TB Rips, and I had started out trying to make videos of product openings, and I would do my own reviews on the products that I would open. Well, pretty soon I had to take a real look at what the hell I was doing because I couldn't keep up with it. The prices kept going up, and it just wasn't feasible. And I couldn't justify the cost I was putting into it, and I had to take a step back. And my focus since that point has definitely changed. What I buy now is way scaled back, and it's not always an interesting story that people are going to want to hear or that I'm going to want to talk about on a podcast. And look, I've said it from the beginning. We all have our own reasons for being in this space, in this hobby. What we love, why we are in this, it all depends on the person. But I started this thing out. I started this leg of the 3 T's because I love collecting cards. I'm not going to stop collecting cards, but I definitely need to refocus on it. I definitely need to refocus because it's so easy to get caught up in this crap and get bogged down with all the nonsense. And I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, but you just need to be aware of what's going on. Don't be a blind sheep that's being led to the slaughter. That's all I ask. And I tell you at the end of every episode, keep doing what you love, but just be smart about it. Just be smart about it. And don't forget, I've said this from the beginning, fun, that's why we're supposed to do this. Unless you're a flipper, which I'm not, you're supposed to be having fun. Because fun is the most important factor. I don't know. And maybe you all think I'm crazy, but I had to talk about that. I had to talk about that because it's happening and we need to be aware of what's going on. But anyway, okay, let's turn our attention to the squared circle. Wrestling marks, how are we feeling? Time is ticking by. We are turning our attention to the Elimination Chamber in good old Chicago, Illinois. Coming up quick, quick, folks, it is 2 weeks away. The focus on Raw and SmackDown the last week and a half, it's been about qualifying matches. It's been about filling out the Elimination Chamber card. I am so freaking excited to go to this one. I can't wait. It has been on my bucket list to go to an Elimination Chamber show, and I'm so excited. 2 weeks. I can't wait to be there in Chicago. So far, we've seen on SmackDown, we've seen Randy Orton qualify. Obviously, there's going to be another one tonight on SmackDown. LA Knight qualified on Monday Night Raw on the men's side, and then on the women's side, we've seen Tiffany Stratton on SmackDown and Rhea Ripley from the Raw side. And it looks like we are moving forward with a couple other matches on the card. We're getting CM Punk versus Finn Balor. Oh my goodness, are we actually going to have the year 2026 be the year of Balor? Probably not, but I am getting myself psyched up about this. Is there any chance he wins? We'll do an Elimination Chamber preview probably in a week or two once we know what the chamber looks like. But I am super psyched to see Punk versus Balor too. They had a banger of a match a couple weeks ago on Raw. That match was fire. I love Finn Balor. I will be in Chicago cheering on Balor. Could we see the Demon? Could we see the Demon come out at Elimination Chamber? I mean, holy cow. I will be like a little freaking school kid if that's the case. I would love to see it with the old music, the old face paint, the whole gear. But I am super excited for that match. What else has been added? AJ Lee versus Becky Lynch. This kind of went forward on Monday Night Raw. I'm looking forward to the match, but what was going on with that promo? That was a super weird promo. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with that one, but they come out there, they start this awkward laughing stuff. It was just weird. I don't know whether AJ has been gone too long and now she's just doing this weird way of talking on the mic. And then Becky was kind of tapping into it as well. I'm not sure what they were going for. It didn't really work for me. But anyway, the match was set up. But again, I'll be in Chicago rooting for Becky Lynch. I know you all love AJ, but Becky's the best. She is the man for a reason, and she's on top of the industry. But what I did this week, I love to take DeLorean trips. You know that. I'm a big nostalgia guy. And with the Elimination Chamber just around the corner, what I wanted to do, I wanted to go all the way back to the very first Elimination Chamber match. This happened way back in 2002. This took place in the Survivor Series pay-per-view, if you can believe it. The very first Elimination Chamber was a single match that occurred during Survivor Series 2002. This took place in Madison Square Garden. Now, what they did, they lowered the cage. Now, the Elimination Chamber, if you've never seen it, it's a dome-like structure that fits over the ring. And it essentially extends the ring on a parallel platform. So on each side of the ring, you now have a metal floor. And on each corner, by each turnbuckle, is a plexiglass enclosed pod. So you have 4 enclosed pods. The floor outside the ring is metal. It's a metal structure. And then this cage encloses the entire thing. So all the pods and the entire ring is enclosed in a caged-like structure. So you think your normal Hell in a Cell, well, this is a dome, a curved dome, and they've added 4 pods. This is a 6-man, a 6-woman match. You have 6 members all come down to the ring. 4 of them are locked in a pod, and 2 start one-on-one in the center of the ring. And there's a predetermined amount of time. Usually it's like 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, a new pod is opened and another wrestler enters into the match. So this very first one taking place all the way back in 2002, MSG, you had Eric Bischoff, who was part of the company at the time. He is essentially credited with being the creator of this match. Well, he comes out and he gets on the microphone and he basically explains the rules of the match, which I just explained to you. He claims that this plexiglass on each one of these pods is bulletproof. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. That's probably not true at all. But anyway, you have your very first contestants come down. Chris Jericho is the first one out being introduced. And this was weird because his theme song at the time was King of My World. And it was done by a band called Saliva. If you remember this group, Saliva, like I said, this was in New York City. WWE also had a restaurant at the time called WWE World. And what they were doing, Saliva was actually live from this restaurant and they were performing Jericho's entrance music as he was coming down to the ring. It was very strange, but it was not good. Like, It did not sound like the actual recorded version. He sounded terrible. I don't recommend you turn this on just to watch the Saliva performance, but anyway, it is what it is. So he comes down to a live performance by this band Saliva and his own theme song, and he gets locked in one of the pods. Next, we have Booker T. Everyone knows Booker T. He's currently an NXT commentator, but Hall of Famer, the great five-time champion Booker T. And so he's also in this match. And we have everyone's favorite friendly neighborhood demon, Kane. He's also comes down with his fire and whatnot. Shawn Michaels gets introduced. He is the last one to be locked into one of the pods. He comes down rocking this terrible looking Karen haircut. It was terrible. His hair was in this weird length where it was just above his shoulders. So gone was his long flowing locks and the ponytail he used to rock. And it was just terrible length, and he looked awful. It just looked awful. Like he's going to get in the pickup line at school, and then he delivers some cupcakes afterwards. I don't know. He looked terrible, but he's the last one to get locked into a pod. And then the last two who will be starting in the ring, you have Rob Van Dam, Mr. RVD, Mr. Pay-Per-View himself, and then the reigning champion, Triple H. So the match starts out, Triple H, Rob Van Dam. Within the first 5 minutes, you see Rob Van Dam throwing Triple H into the side, one of the sides of the cages. So they're outside the ring. They're standing on this platform, and he's throwing Triple H into the side of the cage. Well, it breaks. Like there's a section of the cage, the very first Elimination Chamber match, and he throws Triple H into the wall, and the wall breaks. And I'm like, oh boy, this is not a good start. He literally slams him into it 3 times, and on the third time, the section of the cage breaks. And then Triple H is bleeding, and it's just crazy. So they move away from that section. I think they tried to fix it off camera probably, but a couple things I noticed from this first match, anytime they did a move on the actual steel floor, it was loud. So whether it was a body slam or a drop or something, every time they hit the outside connected floor that's made of steel or metal or whatever the hell it was made of, it would rattle like you wouldn't believe. And it was crazy. And another thing I noticed, that the top of the pods on each turnbuckle, they weren't enclosed. So the top of the pods actually had these chains going across them. So they were kind of open, which is weird. And I want to say this is probably the only time it was like this, because normally the pods are completely enclosed, including at the top. So there's this one section where Rob Van Dam climbs one of the pods to do like a frog splash on Triple H, and he's on top of Chris Jericho's pod, and Jericho literally climbs up and reaches through the top of the cage and grabs RVD's leg. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So it was just very weird to see how far this chamber has come in the last, 23 years. Anyway, a certain amount of time, I think it's like 5-6 minutes go by, and they do this stupid, weird computer generated sound, like a randomized sound, and the light flashes around on one of the 4 pods, and it lands on Chris Jericho. So Chris Jericho's the next one to come out, and now it's a 3-person match. So they're fighting, time goes by, and the next to be released from the pod is Booker T. So you have RVD, Chris Jericho, Booker T, and Triple H. They're all fighting. Rob hits a frog splash. Rob Van Dam hits a frog splash on Triple H from on top of the pod, but he basically lands really awkwardly. And instead of landing like on Triple H, he like jumps off the pod and kind of lands on his feet and then falls down. And it was real awkward. It looked like it hurt like hell. And then Booker T hits him with the drop kick, which is weird of all moves. He hits RVD with a simple drop kick, and then he pins him, and Rob Van Dam is gone. So I don't know if that was supposed to be the finish to get Rob eliminated, but I think he probably hurt himself from that frog splash. Anyway, he's eliminated, so now we're down to Booker T, Chris Jericho, and Triple H. Kane is the next one to be released. He goes to work. He throws Jericho into one of the pod structures in the corner, and Jericho basically breaks all the plexiglass, which they told you was bulletproof, by the way. Jericho breaks all the plexiglass out of this pod. And this is kind of a theme that you will see in every one of the Elimination Chamber matches moving forward. If you watch some of these, you're going to see somebody get thrown into the pod and something break in one, if not more, of the pods. But then Kane hits Booker T with a chokeslam, and a minute later Jericho pins him, and Booker T's gone. So finally then you see HBK get released. He's the last one to come out of the pods, and now everyone's going at it, and away we go, right? So Kane's chokeslamming everybody. The match kind of slows way down because I think probably people were tired, but then Kane is the victim of a super kick, a pedigree, and a Chris Jericho lionsault, and then he's gone. So now we're down to Jericho, Triple H, and HBK. Everyone is busted way open at this point. Everyone's bleeding. they didn't care how much you bled back then. It was just kind of ridiculous. But Jericho hits a lionsault on HBK, but he kicks out. Triple H and Jericho managed to, they had been working together up to this point. Well, they suddenly turn on each other and they start going at it. Triple H goes to hit a pedigree on Chris Jericho, but he kind of reverses it and spins Triple H into the walls of Jericho. But as he puts him into the walls of Jericho, which is a submission move, kind of like it's just a Boston Crab, let's be honest. But as he puts Triple H in the walls of Jericho, here comes HBK and nails him with a sweet chin music. And then he is pinned by HBK. So now we are down to HBK and Triple H. Both of them are busted wide open. There's a catapult spot where HBK is kind of catapulted into the pod. Of course, they keep fighting. There's an elbow drop onto Triple H from HBK on from off the top of the pod again. And of course, he does the same thing that RVD does. He did this weird landing. Maybe they hadn't tested this. Maybe they hadn't practiced with this structure at all. But it seemed like these guys were literally jumping off the pod and just landing on their feet and then doing their move. It was very awkward, just weird as hell. But anyway, the match goes on. HBK goes to hit him with a super kick. He reverses into a pedigree, but HBK kicks out. He can't manage to get the full 3 count. And then HBK hits him with a sweet chin music, covers Triple H, and we get a 1, 2, 3 new champion. The place absolutely goes nuts. Madison Square Garden, the pop on the win for Shawn Michaels, is insane, right? JR, so Jim Ross, he is one of the great commentators of all time. He was commentating at the time. It's JR and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Jerry loses his mind. He is screaming his head off. The place goes crazy. He loses his voice. You can hear his voice go as he's screaming over this new win from HBK. Confetti starts to rain down from Madison Square Garden, and there you see HBK with his Karen haircut winning the heavyweight title. Confetti is raining down over him and his bloody face. So there is your very first Elimination Chamber. It was not bad. It was not bad for a first time. I wonder, looking back, had they actually practiced inside this structure, or did they just wing it? Because some of the things looked weird as hell. Some of the things looked awkward. There were some quick eliminations once things got going, but I think it was okay. And like I said, I think RVD probably hurt himself and had to eat a quick pin, but who knows? Either way, like I said, there's some weird spots, but not too bad. If I were to rate it, looking back on the very first Elimination Chamber match, I think I would give it a 2.75 turnbuckles out of 4. So there you go. That's my review. We're going to have some things to talk about moving forward with WWE as we move into the Elimination Chamber in 2 weeks, but I think that's going to wrap up the wrestling portion of the show. Buffalo Bills Mafia, how are we feeling? What do we want to talk about? Because it's getting a little slow. It's a slow news cycle for the Buffalo Bills. So what I figured I would do, I always like to look up Buffalo Bills news and see kind of what's being talked about and see if I can, have anything be relevant when it comes to the Bills and anything that would be exciting to talk about. And so what are we in? We're waiting for the combine to start. We're waiting for the draft to get going. And we're still a couple weeks, if not months away from that stuff. So it comes down to roster examination. And sometimes this is exciting. Sometimes it's not. But I think, the cap, the NFL released that the cap was going up about $29-30 million. This has been our Achilles heel going into each and every offseason. We find ourselves under the cap, specifically now it depends what site you're looking at, but anywhere from $9.5 to $11-12 million over the cap is where the Bills are currently sitting. And that's after the cap is going up. So I don't want to say we're in trouble, because if you look at different sites. Now, what's cool, I don't know if any of you have ever done this, you can go to certain websites and you can see all the contracts of every team in the league, and you can see what those contracts break down to, what the average annual salary is of these players, what the total deal of the each deal is. You could see how much the deal costs against the cap, what the debt, you can get lost in the weeds. Some of this stuff is really confusing, but anyway, you're seeing articles come out. You're seeing how the Bills can essentially restructure certain deals and how they can immediately get cap compliant by the start of the new year. And they're going to have to. So every team is required to get in the positive. And like I said, right now we're operating between 9 and 11, maybe $12 million under the cap. So there needs to be cuts or restructures or pay cuts that happen. So everyone looks about deals that make sense. And we've done this with Josh Allen pretty much every year. We do a restructure and we kind of essentially kick the can. So while he's still going to make the money, we essentially rework the deal. And I'm not totally sure how this works, but you kind of kick the can. And what I mean by that is you essentially move his money further down the line. So you might not pay some of it this year, but you'll pay it in years to come. So what they're saying is if we restructure Josh Allen, we can instantly save $12 million. So that right there, that one move can essentially make us cap compliant. And other players who are kind of in a similar boat, Ed Oliver, if you restructure Ed Oliver, you could save probably another $10 million. Spencer Brown, depending on how much they're looking to move down the line. And some of this stuff I'm getting from other websites, so don't think I'm so smart that I know what the hell I'm talking about. But I read like Buffalo Rumblings, and I look on some of these sites that people know what they're talking about, because I really don't. But they're saying if we restructure Spencer Brown, we could save anywhere from $6 to $10 million. There's certain players on the team that make sense to do the restructure. So, and when you're looking at who do we want to restructure, it has to be a player that you know is good, number one, and that's going to stay on the team for more than a few years, right? Because you don't want to be on the hook for these salaries years and years after the player is either retired or moved on to another team. So Josh Allen, yeah, that makes sense. Ed Oliver, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Spencer Brown, yeah, he's pretty good. I don't really want to lose Spencer Brown. But then you get to the next one, and this one's kind of caused a little bit of controversy, a little bit of talking points around the Buffalo community. We get to Deion Dawkins. Now, Deion Dawkins, they're saying that if you restructure his contract, you could save anywhere from 8 to 11 million, depending on how much you want to move down to for future years. And so the talking point has come up that Deion Dawkins might be a trade candidate. And I'm just like, let me think about that for a second. Is Deion Dawkins a trade candidate? And I just don't see how this is ever going to happen. There was kind of a notion a few years back that Stephon Diggs was untradeable. And we learned that wasn't, in fact, the case. But we did have to eat a lot of dead cap money, as they call it. Stephon Diggs had essentially worn out his welcome, and we were ready to ship him out of town despite whatever the cost might be. Deion Dawkins, he's like one of, I don't know, 3 to 4 players on this team that you would think are essentially untouchable, not just for their play. And I admit, like his play on the field for 2025, was it peak Dawkins' performance? No, but he's still pretty damn good. He's still one of the top left tackles in the league. So I don't want to get into, well, he's past his prime. I still think he's got quite a few number of years, really good years, really solid years ahead of him. And do I want to move on from Deion Dawkins? No. In fact, at the beginning of the season, I did an episode talking about potential jerseys that I would buy. And I think Deion Dawkins, he has a chance to go on the Wall of Fame for the Bills. Like, he could play his whole career here. Him and Josh. I would love to see Dawkins and Josh go down together as the dynamic duo and essentially host the Lombardi Trophy and just go down in Buffalo Bills lore as 2 Bills who are going up on the Wall of Fame. So do I want to move on from Deion Dawkins? No. I think outside of his contract scenario, outside of his contract value, I think he's worth too much to the community. He does a ton of work in Buffalo and around Buffalo, and I just think he's too important. So is he a trade candidate? I can't see that. But some other names that come up, and these are some of the hot topics. Dawson Knox, yeah, he's on the hook for a ridiculous amount of money this year. I think it's like, I don't know, $18 million is what we're looking to pay him this year. Dawson Knox, hell no, you're not worth no $18 million. So they're saying, well, he can either take a pay cut, or we could cut him, or we could, do some kind of restructure. And I think that's pretty fair. I think we're looking to save like $11 million by doing some sort of restructure, or do I want to see Dawson Knox cut? Again, I think he's one of these guys that's such a solid point to this team. And I think he plays an integral role to not only the tight end room, but to the team as a whole. So I really think, and I hope, that Dawson Knox will kind of come to some agreement with Bean, and they'll meet in the middle, and maybe he'll come in and be willing to take a pay cut. But some of these other guys, like Curtis Samuel, you could basically cut Curtis Samuel and save $6 million, and you're probably like, well, who the hell is Curtis Samuel? And I'll say, yeah, that's a good point, because he's never on the field. I would not bat an eyelash about cutting Curtis Samuel. Same thing with Taylor Rapp. We saw this and talked about this earlier. Taylor Rapp coming off the field. Now, this was due to injury. He had surgery, but taking him off the field was almost addition by subtraction. So we'll save $3 million if we cut Taylor Rapp. And then another one that's kind of in this weird gray period. We could cut Tyler Bass and save almost $3 million. So $2.9 million to get rid of Tyler Bass. That's tough. That's tough. He also had surgery on his hip, I believe, and he didn't kick at all this year. So Matt Prater did fine, but again, he's like 87 billion years old. Do you want to rely on Matt Prater coming back for another year? Maybe, if you can get him at like the league minimum, if he's willing to come in and play for practically free, and we could save a couple mil cutting T-Bass. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to it, but who the heck knows? And then a couple other ones. Matt Milano, look, his deal is done. His deal is done. He's going to be one of these guys that I'm not sure how he's going to fit into the shift in defensive philosophy, moving to the 3-4. Does he have a spot? Does he have a spot with the new defensive coordinator, Jim Leonard? I don't know, maybe. But could he? I would have to think that if he wants to stay in Buffalo, he's going to really have to come to terms with what his role is going to be and like what his value to this team is going to be. I would love to see him come back, but it has to be significant. It's got to be like one of these Trey White deals. I don't know what he would get on the open market. It would be very interested to see what he gets. But we're looking at paying him dead cap money of $11 million if he's not on the roster. So we need to do something. He either needs to agree to a total restructure or we just eat $11 million. And that's the thing that's frustrating. You look at some of these deals and you're like, why are we paying these guys to not be on the team? It's just crazy. But I don't know. Another one they're talking about, we have a guard and offensive line problem. So you have David Edwards, you have Connor McGovern. Those guys are done. They're going to command big money. Are we going to pay a ton of money that we don't have right now to David Edwards and Connor McGovern? I don't know. And then Osiris Torrance has 1 year left on his rookie deal. He could be a candidate for an early extension. You know, Brandon Beane loves to give out these early extensions. Sometimes they work out in our favor. Sometimes they don't. The Taron Johnson extension, that one ain't looking good. The Terrell Bernard extension, I don't know. Think what you want. But Bernard, I don't think, played very well this year. What will his role be, again, in the new defense? It's hard to tell. But do we extend Torrance? I don't know. We kind of got some guys in Anderson and Van Pran Granger who are kind of been waiting in the wings. And I think one, if not both, could be slotted into the starting lineup. And I think we definitely will take a step down, but is it worth the huge investment we will have to shell out to keep some of these guys? I don't know. I think this is where we turn to in the draft in some of the later rounds, maybe like round 3 or 4. We see us start to pick away at some of these offensive line spots, but we have a lot of holes to fill. And these are just some of the things I'm seeing. And with the new league year about to start, this is what you're going to start to see as we turn the corner. This is going to be the story of what is going to need to be addressed. And you're going to see restructures. You're going to see cap cut casualties. You're going to see some players that you thought were going to be on this team get cut. And we're going to come out here and we're going to complain and we're going to throw our hands up and go, why? And it's going to be a fun next couple of months. So anyway, there's really not much else to talk about. I already talked about the coaching changes. I already talked about the new vision moving forward. And that's it. So I thought we just do a kind of a general roster breakdown on some of these roster decisions that Brandon Beane has moving forward. It's not an easy job, but he's got a lot of work to do. Who's going to be up for trade? Who's going to be available versus free agency? And of course, coming into the combine and the draft, it's going to be crazy to see what direction Jim Leonard and Joe Brady want to take this thing heading into 2026. But I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the 3Ts podcast. Do me a favor, share it with someone you know if you have enjoyed this episode or any other episode of the 3Ts. Yeah, help your boy out. Share it with anybody. I don't care if it's your neighbor, your grandma, whoever, your teacher, whatever you want. Share it with whomever you meet on the street. Just help me out. Let's spread the word. So whether you're a fellow Mafia member, a card collector, someone who just loves professional wrestling, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to grow this thing one episode at a time. So please hit that follow, hit that like, leave me a quick review, and let's build this thing together. And as always, I appreciate you all very, very much. So until next time, whether it's ripping packs, breaking tables, or dropping elbows, keep doing what you love. And as always, go Bills.